The Broken Blade, Chapter 12. A Broken Blade. By the time Charbonneau's canoe reached Lake Huron, Pierre could see that Mackay had already ordered the search to begin. 3 of the Montreals paddled back and forth across the outlet of the French River. While the crewmen scanned the water with hopeful eyes, a dozen men combed the shore of the lake, while a dozen others ran back up the river, hoping to find some trace of the missing man. A half hour later La Petite returned from his search upriver. He was holding the blade of Lalonde's paddle. They searched for an hour in silence. Just before sundown, Charbonneau found the second half of Lalonde's paddle floating well out into the lake. He scooped up the broken piece, declaring simply, "The big lakes don't like to give up their dead." For a long while no one moved or spoke, and the canoe floated silently across the black water. Finally Emile spoke to no one in particular. "It's a cold, mean place to lie forever." A few minutes later Charbonneau turned the boat toward shore. The cool, damp smell of night was already in the air. Pierre fought back his tears, remembering what Belgrade said that first day on the beach about never feeling sorry for no man what's still alive. Pierre recalled the coffin they'd met at St. Anne's Chapel. He closed his eyes a moment and imagined the corpse of Lalonde drifting in the cold current of Huron. His hair waved gently in green light, and his body, pale arms and legs extended, sank deeper into the darkness. Later, as the men rolled out their blankets, there was none of the usual joking. Emile, who was preparing his bed nearby, looked toward Pierre just as he reached to untie his knife. Emile stared at the carved handle and asked, "Why did it have to be him?" Pierre shook his head. He had seen the same question in every man's eyes tonight, and he suspected no one knew the answer. For now he didn't want to talk or think. Though he wasn't physically tired, he felt an incredible weariness, and he wanted to lie down. "And look what we're stuck with," Emile continued, tilting his head toward Jean Beloit. "That fellow's deserved drowning every day of his life, but he'll probably live to 100. Pierre nodded, feeling wicked. He almost smiled at the thought of Beloit drowning. If only that cackling fool had been silenced by the dark waters. Though the next morning was warm and brilliant blue, the men moved as if they were numb with cold. In silence they paddled up and down the shore for an hour, dutifully trying one last time to find their bowman's body. Then Pierre helped La Petite and Charbonneau tie Lalonde's broken paddle together in the shape of a cross and paint it with vermilion dye borrowed from a parcel of trade goods. They hiked up the hill and set the cross in a pile of rocks next to a half-dozen markers. La Petite and Charbonneau started back, but Pierre lingered a moment. He looked to the east and suddenly hated the calm blueness of Huron. He picked up a rock and heaved it as far as he could. Before the first stone clattered onto the boulders that rimmed the French River gorge, he threw another and another. When Pierre finally stopped, he was panting hard. He wasn't sure how many stones he'd flung at the river, but the edge of his anger was blunted. Before the brigade headed out, John Mackay assembled the men on the beach and said a few words. Mackay ran his hand through his bushy red beard and coughed once before he started. "In a life," he began, "we knew Charles Lalonde as a loyal friend and a skilled canoeman. For the past 2 decades he was dedicated servant to the Northwest Company. Even as we grieve, we are grateful for him for his service and for his recent act of heroism, which saved an entire canoe from certain destruction. He is an example of courage and commitment to us all." Mackay stopped a moment and looked at his men. Pierre bit his lip. "It is hard for us to say goodbye," he continued, "to a man so kind and good." Pierre was impressed with the minister-like tone in Mackay's voice. "Yet lest we be tempted in our grief to question Providence, may I remind you of the 98th Psalm." Mackay paused to open a small brown Bible. "The Lord warns us to prepare, saying, 'What man is he that liveth and shall not see death?'" Mackay looked up at his men and continued, "Whether our parting from this world comes early or late, sudden or slow, it is not our place to question. We take up our journey without knowing where or when it will end. Each man in his turn must one day pass on to greater kingdoms. For as prophet Job reminds us, the water wears away the stones and wash away the things which grow out of the dust of the earth. Man that is born of woman is of few days and full of trouble. He cometh forth like a flower and is cut down. He fleeth also as a shadow and continueth not. After a moment of silence, the commander concluded, reciting as the men joined in, The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. The men stood a few minutes in silence before walking to their canoes. After they boarded their canoe, Charbonneau's crew paused to look up at the red marker. Each man doffed his cap and crossed himself before taking up his paddle. Then, one by one, the blades began their familiar dip and pull. 100 yards out, Pierre glanced back at the hill one last time. Lalonde's newly painted marker made the old ones look shabby. His cross looked larger too, catching more light than all the rest and casting a shadow back over the hill that looked like a huge arrow about to be released on a blurring upstream flight.